Countless trainers, countless tutors, and countless free therapists, and student athletes are still looking for some sort of pay? Unbelievable. College athletes should not get paid because 1. They are student athletes going to school to get an education, and 2. They're simply in college, not the professionals. Yes, they are always working hard and have a lot of different time commitments, but that is just something that these athletes and all college students need to adapt to. Although some people may argue that these big-time athletes bring in a boatload of money to their specific university, I think that these student athletes should not get paid because the athletes receive so many other things such as different services. There isn't enough money for that to even happen, and it would turn into universities buying the best players. For starters, college athletes should not get paid simply because there is not enough money for that to even happen. If one athlete is getting a salary, then every athlete needs to have a salary. There is not enough money for that to happen at smaller Division I schools, and if the football players, for example, are getting paid, that means that the golf and tennis players need to get paid as well. Those sports do not bring in enough money for that to even happen, so therefore it is irrational and not realistic. When you think of college athletes, you often think of big-time basketball or football players at the bigger schools. But when you take into consideration that there are hundreds of small Division I schools with many different sports at each, it's just not logical to pay everyone equally and fairly. Not every school and sport brings in a ton of revenue. People might propose only paying the most talented athletes at the big-time schools, but that would just be unfair and that would just cause conflict. Therefore, I think that there is not enough money to pay all students, athletes equally. Another reason why I think college athletes shouldn't get paid would be the fact that these student athletes already receive so many other free services, and the best services. These athletes are already going to school for practically free based off their scholarships, so that would be unfair to pay them on top of that. As I mentioned earlier, these athletes, scholarship or not, receive free trainers, therapists, tutors, and equipment. They already have enough of all of that. According to the NCAA, athletic scholarships cover about $30,000 a year for each player, depending on what Division I school you go to. But this is another reason why you shouldn't get paid, because everything is basically free already. These athletes, despite being extremely busy, live like kings and queens, so therefore they should not receive any money because everything is practically paid for and they receive so many different free services. Lastly, I think that these college athletes should not be paid because then universities would be basically buying their players. If universities paid college athletes, there would be an even bigger gap between large and small universities, and we don't want that to continue to grow. The larger schools with a lot of money would essentially be able to buy the best players, and this would ruin different sports forever. You can't convert the NCAA into a money system. You need to keep the programs running the same way they have been for hundreds of years. The scouting would change, different school programs would change, and money would simply be ruining that all. If college athletes were to be paid, there would be no fair and equal way to go about it. Starters versus bench players, big universities versus state schools, exactly. It is extremely complicated, and there is no equal and fair way. In conclusion, college athletes shouldn't be paid because the whole college sports industry would just turn into a money market bribe system. College athletes, receive the best trainers, have the best tutors, and have basically everything handed to them off of the field. These athletes should not get a pay simply because they basically go to school for free. They receive so many free services. The payout for each athlete would not be fair and equal, and it would change the dynamics of college sports for the worst. You shouldn't get paid to play a sport when you are at college. Playing a sport is a privilege, not a job.